John is 17 months old. John will soon go to a residential nursery, while his mother is in hospital to have a second baby. He has never been out of his mother's care. His father is a young professional man, and the family live comfortably. John is a placid child and easy to manage. He moves about freely. He and his mother have a quiet and harmonious relationship. Suddenly, John is in a strange world. John's parents had taken him to the nursery during the night, when the mother's labor began. He cried when they left, but was asleep within half an hour. He scans the unfamiliar face of Nurse Mary. The blanket is his favorite cuddly from home. Another new face, Nurse Christine. Mary feeds another child. John eats well. The 5 other children have been in the nursery for most of their lives. They are alert to defend themselves and snatch what they want. They are looked after by frequently changing nurses and have no experience of protective, loving relationships. These children are all about the same age and make a noisy, primitive group, which is very different from the family life John has known. John played well with the many toys. But for much of the time stood apart, looking and listening. John would like to be near the nurse, but she is busy with the other children. She is often unaware of his timid attempts to get her attention. Throughout the day, he watched the door. Many times he tried to open it and waved goodbye. At lunchtime, John eats well. But he is troubled by the noisy fighting going on around him. Several times he shut his eyes and put his hands over his ears. At rest time, John interacted brightly with Nurse Christine. He called after her when she left. When Father visited, it was several minutes before John gave him a smile. On this first day, he lets Father leave without protest. He quickly goes back to his play. A family child is no match for such aggression. Again, he enjoys a friendly game with Nurse Christine. But it is yet another nurse who baths him, while nurses Mary and Christine are bathing other children. This is the fourth nurse to handle John on the first day. In this system of group care, the nurses do whatever task comes to hand. They are not assigned to the care of individual children. Throughout the first day, John has shown no distress. He had been friendly towards each nurse who dealt with him, and any one of these could become a substitute mother. On the second morning, although there were times of absorbed play, John often moved about aimlessly, because no nurse thought to play with him. The nurses respond to the more demanding children, like Martin, and the quiet ones go unnoticed. Martin had been with a foster mother for a year, and he continues to seek affection. John's timid attempts to get near Nurse Mary go unnoticed. Again, it took time for John to respond to his father. Then he played with him. When the father left, John fought furiously to go with him. His persistence contrasted with the quiet, uncomplaining behavior all through the day. After recovering in the arms of Nurse Mary, John again shows his readiness to make a relationship. But Mary has other children to attend to. On the third day, the busy nurses saw John as a quiet but not unhappy child who rarely cried. But John had become much more subdued. He often turned his back on the group and played quietly with small toys. A new batch of nurses came on duty, and John initiated play with one of them. But soon Martin had claimed her attention, and John gave up without a fight. John needed someone to mother him, someone he could turn to for comfort, play, and affection. He often went to the big teddy bears, sometimes cuddling up to them, sometimes carrying them about. John began to grumble at slight frustrations. He sucked more. But during Father's visit, John is again the lively family child. On the fourth day, Nurse Mary was back on duty. During the night, John had been sick, but the doctor found nothing to account for it. He continued trying to get the nurse's attention, but his approaches were not assertive enough. He sat opposite the nurse. He looked at her from afar. He sat quietly by her side. But he cannot compete with the nursery children. Again, he gets what comfort he can from the teddy bears. At lunchtime, the other children behave in their usual noisy and uncontrolled way. Whereas on the first day John had been interested, he is now overwhelmed. There are outbursts of distressed crying. He began to refuse food. In the afternoon, John's behaviour changed. He pushed to get close to Nurse Mary, no longer quiet and undemanding. This made her aware of his unhappiness, and she makes a place for him. Only his greater insistence had got him what he wanted. But he is soon displaced by Martin. He tries again. After disappointments, he often came to play quietly in my corner. John had eaten hardly any breakfast and no lunch at all. He now refuses supper. At bedtime, he cried bitterly. The mounting unhappiness had at last broken through. By the 5th day, Nurse Mary is concerned about John's unhappiness, but they are both defeated by the system of group care, which makes it impossible for her to give him individual attention. John tried repeatedly to get onto Mary's lap. And whenever he succeeded, he quietened. But this never lasted for more than a few minutes. He gives up the struggle for a while. Then he tries again to get close to Mary. He refuses her offer of a toy. He wants comfort, not play. His quiet grief and attacks by the children go unnoticed in the hubbub of nursery life. John can no longer cope with his unhappiness. Finally, he gives way to desperate crying, and Mary is forced to give him her full attention. For a long time he was inconsolable. When John got the individual attention he needed, he became lively and warm in interaction with Mary. But the threat of losing her disturbed this relationship. Now he cannot play. His distress is so great that Mary has to devote herself entirely to John, leaving the other children. This is the 6th day. John is again on his own. Mary has the morning off, and the other young nurses are not aware of his worsening state. The nurses are not unkind, but they are accustomed to the shouts and cries of the nursery children. John cried almost non-stop, while nursery routines went on around him. He was still not eating, and this caused some concern to the charge nurse. She tried to feed him, but he still refused. She took his temperature, but it was normal. The father's visit brings a ray of hope. Some animation returns to John's face and body. He shows clearly his wish to go home. He tries to open the door. He brings his outdoor shoes. But when Father does not move, John turns away from him. To the cuddly blanket. And to Nurse Mary. Then he turns away from them both. When Father leaves, there is a delay in John's reaction. He goes half-heartedly to the door and back to Mary for comfort. But he lost her again. It is the charge nurse who puts him to bed, while he can see Nurse Mary with another child. He looks towards Nurse Mary, complaining in a weak, croaking voice, made worse by a slight cold. By the 7th day, John is no longer content to play quietly beside me. He asks for more. He did not want to play, did not want to eat. The protest had gone out of his cry. It is weak and pitiful. He looks towards the nurse, but he fights for her no longer. Nor does he try to keep his favorite nurse. But retreats under his cuddly blanket. By the 8th day, John had deteriorated still further. He was depressed and apathetic. I remained a source of slight comfort, as did the teddy bears. John had not eaten much for several days, and this, together with his persistent crying, could not be overlooked. He was now nursed a great deal. But each time he settled, the nurse had to attend to another child. So he went from lap to lap, never getting lasting comfort.